Hello, everybody. Welcome to Common Censored. Thanks for joining us today on this lovely day. I feel like there's too many shadows on my face. I look a little sinister right now.
You don't.
I do.
I look really shiny. It looks like I've been buffing my face with shoe polish.
Shiny is in.
Not.
It totally is. People pay thousands of dollars for that shine. They do. I don't understand. Why do people like spray themselves in some sort of lacquer? I don't really understand what it comes from. I know that yours comes from these lights we have on, but I mean, and when people walk around in society and they look like a newborn lizard, what is that? What happened there?
They went to the Blick art store and got the photo finish spray and just.
Thanks for being here. All right, so we're going to get into creeping fascism across America. Always a hot topic. Always fun to talk about how fascism is taking over our world. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into, we're going to talk a little more for a moment about the imploded submersible, but we're going to talk about it in a way that the mainstream media generally does not. So we're going to get into that as well. What else was on the agenda? Oh, Supreme Court decisions, Biden's idiotic foreign policy, Zelensky possibly prepping for another false flag. We got a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun. It's like we actually got it off a Chuck E. Cheese menu. All of this, the whole breakdown today.
Ugh.
Not a fan of
Ugh.
Chuck E. Cheese? Okay.
Wasn't it supposed to be something? It was supposed to be a different mascot. And they got there.
Yeah, it's very weird for a pizza restaurant to have a rat as a mascot because it makes you think perhaps not a cleanly place. And that's because they fucked up. It was like the opening day, and they were supposed to send a fox, and they got a rat, and he said, "All right,
well, we're going with it.
Sticking with the rat."
I mean, it worked for Disneyland, Disney World. Mouse.
That's a mouse.
Oh, come on.
There's a difference.
There's a difference, but barely. I mean, if you found a rat in your pizza, would you be that much more horrified than if you found a mouse in your pizza?
All right, so
Just saying.
I actually ordered rat pizza. It's delicious. So let's start off with someone put together a great analysis of the creeping fascism, specifically in Florida. But we're going to talk about how it's not just about Florida. This is about more than just Florida. And they start off with a good definition of fascism, because I think that is important in this. So this is coming from the Cambridge Dictionary. Fascism, a political system based on a very powerful leader, state control of social and economic life, and extreme pride in country and race, with no expression of political disagreement allowed. Some defining characteristics are anti-democratic policies and laws. We haven't seen any of those, have we? Extreme nationalism. I call it toxic nationalism. The cult of personality. No. Where? Stifling dissent and protest, creating scapegoats like migrants or LGBTQ, etc., stripping rights away from citizens, rejecting modernity, banning books, education and free speech, increased militarism and policing, contempt for free and fair elections, creating social hierarchy. Now, as we'll see in these slides, they're focusing on Ron DeSantis, one of our most capable fascists or wannabe fascists in this country. However, much of that list would fit for a lot of America right now. It'd fit for Democrats. I mean, who's stifling dissent and encouraging the surveillance and attack on journalists like Matt Taibbi more than Democrats? So you get a little bit of both. But I thought we'd focus for a moment on DeSantis. So here are some of the bills he has put forward, Oh, I hate that.
You hate my face.
Well, for those listening on the podcast, by the way, this is also a podcast. Every once in a while, I toggle to the wrong format and it just covers up Eleanor's face. But here's the thing. I can use that when it's just me. I can use that one and it's not a problem.
No, I think you have that marked as fuck Eleanor's face on your
no
StreamYard choices.
No, that is not true. House Bill 543 allows people to carry concealed loaded guns without permits, training, or background checks. In signing it into law, Florida became the 26th state to allow for permitless carry. So there you see, this is not just DeSantis. But
well, and also I'd like to point out that nowhere do you need training. the first time I ever went to a gun range with a friend of mine, I walked up there and you just walk up to the counter and he's like, we'd like a couple of, whatever he fucking said. And he was like, okay.
You were about to give it an attempt. I'd like a couple of
whatever.
the bang bangs. What the switchy bang bangs.
And I guarantee you, if I had walked up to the counter and said I would like a switchy bang bang, he would have fucking given me a gun, no questions asked. But then my friend who I was with goes, okay, well, she's never shot a gun before. It's her first time. And the guy just goes, okay. Like, no, like, hey, well, come over here. I'm going to have to give you a demonstration. None of that shit. And then he just hands the guns over. And then my friend said, could you give her a rundown of the gun? And the guy's like, oh, he like looks annoyed. And then he goes through it so fast that I was like, I don't know what the fuck you just did. It was like Forrest Gump, like putting the gun together. He was like, and then like he just walked away. He's like, all right, have fun. And I'm like, have fun? I could just accidentally shoot you in the back. Like you. And so my friend had to show me once we got into the shoot. And I'm like, this is horrifying.
Which is pretty much how guns are treated in America.
How it works here. Like nobody needs training.
We treat them. There's an episode of Simpsons back when I used to watch it, which was roughly 30 years ago, where Homer gets a gun and he loves it. He falls in love with it. And he's just using it for everything, like to turn off the TV, just shoots bullets through it. And it really is a lot of Americans like that now. It's, we don't take it seriously. We just, I didn't mean to cover up your face.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But, my thing is like, look around at most Americans. Do you really want them handling, like hiding guns from you?
Dude,
it's terrifying.
I consider myself a good person. I don't think I should have a concealed gun.
Well, my true stance on guns in this country is I don't think we're ever going to be Australia where it's like no one has a gun. So we're in a gun culture and a gun country. Mm-hmm. However, everybody I've ever talked to or ever spoken to actually believes in some kind of weapon control. I don't know anyone who thinks that average citizens should have nuclear weapons or even really grenade launchers or be able to drive their own tanks. So
I don't think that anybody should have tanks, to be honest, but that's a separate
story. Oh yeah, I think all of those should be banned on the planet. But my point is, so that means we're just arguing over shades of gray. Well, let's figure out those shades of gray. What the fuck should be allowed and what shouldn't? What should be permitted and what shouldn't? Instead, people act like it's just guns or no guns. That's the whole debate. And it's like, no, that's an ignorant debate if you want to pretend that there's nothing in between that. All right. I don't want to spend forever on fucking dumb fuck DeSantis. So Bill 214 bans credit card companies from applying a code to purchases of guns and ammunition. These codes are meant to help track suspicious weapons companies found in violation. Of all the things DeSantis has done, I'm probably less offended by that one because I don't trust corporate America either.
No, but
I get it though. Yeah.
These type of laws are helpful in, for instance, domestic violence cases. Like if somebody has a restraining order and they purchased a gun, like a little red flag will show up. Whether or not anybody does a goddamn thing about it is a totally separate conversation. But to make those kind of things more easily traceable is a good idea.
Yeah, no, I get it. He signed into law Bill 300, which bans abortion after 6 weeks before most people even know they're pregnant.
I found out I was pregnant at 8 weeks when I was in my 20s when I got an abortion. So
fair example that it's very common for people not to know they're pregnant within 6 weeks. The law also creates barriers to access for those seeking exceptions to the ban. Those signed into law, the ban remains dormant while the Supreme Court weighs the constitutionality of the state's existing 15-week abortion ban. I mean, this is just continued attack on women choosing their own path in life, which, DeSantis wants Handmaid's Tale, so this fits perfectly.
Well, this is the fallout since abortion access was overturned by the Supreme Court. So this is one example. Now, many other states have also passed similar laws. So this is not Florida being unique entirely, But this is an example of, I guess, Florida being more egregious than most, and how these kind of ideas ping pong from one state to the next, and how dangerous that is.
Yeah, it's I mean, he's going after all kinds of people, and those generally those people who are not who don't have the political power, have less political power to fight back. So it's going after gay people and black people and immigrants, and even women have far less political power in this country. If you look at who's in elected office, it's still heavily male. So you go after the people who have less power to fight back in this society. And this might be a good moment to just stop and say that you specifically, I mean, I certainly agreed, but you've been calling it for a while now, that by allowing and facilitating Trump, which is what the liberals did. I mean, they even, we know from leaked emails, they even Pied Pipered Trump to try and get him to be the nominee because they thought he'd be easy to beat. But by facilitating what he was, and also in many ways getting the liberals across America to defend the police state, to defend the prison state, to defend the CIA, the FBI, to defend endless surveillance, you are making this an easy path for someone who is a more equipped fascist leader. And here are perfect examples of how DeSantis is doing it.
Yeah, and DeSantis is a purposeful fascist. Like, he absolutely believes 100% in his creed, and he has made that very clear in his history. If folks listen to my other podcast, Project Censored, you may have heard that I interviewed Mike Preisner.
If you type in censored, you're likely to find an Eleanor Goldfield podcast. The Common Censored or Project Censored.
Yeah, so Project Censored, you can just go to projectcensored.org. But I interviewed Mike Preisner about his story, that his investigative journalism piece that found, evidence of DeSantis involved in torture, like actually involved as a torturer, and literally laughing about it, really enjoying it.
In Gitmo, right?
Yeah, in Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of person that DeSantis is. Now, Trump is kind of an accidental fascist, and I don't mean that to make him sound better or nicer. It's just that he's a fucking idiot. And so he just stumbles into these perspectives because it makes him popular, and it makes him it makes people love him. It gets him
ego, racism. It's an interesting bubbling cauldron, but it's not
right.
Like he doesn't sit down and have a fascist plan the way that a DeSantis does.
No. And again, like you pointed out, Lee, these people, like Trump, was made possible by the neoliberalism of Clinton and Obama. And neoliberalism leads to fascism. And you can look at this historically outside of this country, absolutely, but also, of course, in this country. Neoliberalism leads to fascism. And that's what we see in this country right now. And, some people might say, oh, fascism, that's a bit of a strong way of putting it. Well, I mean, Lee already read out the other descriptors of fascism that this post shared, but also, if I may quote, which I'm not wont to do very often, Mussolini, because he was a shitface, but he very famously said another name for fascism could absolutely be corporatism. And that basically just, that's what we have in this country. Corporations, a totalitarian regime that is spread between corporations and a oligarchical and capitalist ruling class.
One of the largest, if not the largest police state in the world, the largest prison state in the world, the largest military state in the world. You can't really look at that, our record, our impressive record. You can't exactly look at it and go, oh no, that's a free country. That's what that is. All right, let's see a few more DeSantis bills real quick. Senate Bill 450 reduced the number of jurors needed to recommend a death sentence in the state from 12 to 8, a lower threshold than any other state that actively carries out the death penalty. Now, For any of you who've heard me talk about it before, the death penalty is egregious and disgusting and barbaric and antiquated and so fucked up on every level. It's racist. It's wrong. The estimate is that they found essentially proof that over 4%, somewhere between 4 and 5% of those executed are fully innocent, meaning they didn't do shit. They're just some guy they grabbed and ended up killing them. But beyond just those 5%, you have a lot of people who were in terrible circumstances. You have a lot of people who were severely mentally ill. Death penalty doesn't stop anyone from killing anyone. They've shown that as well. Having the death penalty is just on every level, and I'm not going to go through them all right now because I've done it so many times before. On every level, the death penalty is not what people think it is. It doesn't do what people think it does. All it does is make us, the state, the citizens, have blood on our hands for the murders. Mm-hmm. Sorry. And scene.
Well done. I'm behind you. With you, next to you, whatever. I don't know.
All right. Senate Bill 266 bans colleges and universities from spending state or federal funding to promote, support, or maintain programs or campus activities that advocate for diversity, equity, or inclusion. How's that sound, folks? If you're real excited about that and you're like, oh, thank goodness someone's finally stopping equality and inclusion, then you should reconsider who the fuck you are and what kind of human being you are, because that's fucking pathetic, is what that is.
Yep.
Senate Bill 1580 allows healthcare providers and insurers in the state to refuse services based on their own personal, moral, ethical, or religious beliefs. To healthcare providers to refuse service. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's such insanity because, like, we literally have, like, laws in the Constitution that are meant to stop that kind of thing, because otherwise someone can just be like, yeah, my religion says I don't like black people, so not helping you.
Yeah, no, it's despicable, but it's par for the course.
Just do a couple more here and then we'll move on.
I think you already went. Wait, you already...
Did I skip one? Senate Bill 1718, per the ACLU, criminalizes Floridians who shelter, support, and provide transportation to undocumented immigrants. Because, you know, that's real moral.
Is anybody else getting, well, probably people haven't been forced to watch as many Holocaust movies as I have had to watch. Thanks, Dad. But does anybody else feel like this is very much like I'm hiding a Jew in my basement and the Gestapo is going to come take me away? Like, does this feel?
I think we're
I'm
getting
feeling like the echoes of that.
Very close to Gestapo level.
Yeah.
And let's remember, though, that as we say this, you know, this is DeSantis being more outwardly fascist, but Obama caged and deported more people than any president before. Trump would have beat that record if he'd had 8 years in office, but unfortunately, he only had 4.
Unfortunately.
So, yeah, unfortunately, he only had 4 to abuse immigrants. So either party you get in there, they're actively trying to abuse these human beings on every level. And so
Biden has already put more money into border control than Trump did. So each president ramps up this fight against refugees seeking asylum. And so.
And yet, if you turn, and this also speaks to how hilarious, like, Fox News is. You have CNN, MSNBC acting like immigration, the Joe Biden loves immigrants or something, whereas he's treating them like shit. And then you have Fox News saying, oh, it's just a crisis at the border. And yet, like you said, Biden's actually put more money in to border, quote unquote, security than even Trump did. Florida Senate Bill 256 puts an end to automatic union dues payments, requiring teachers and other government employees to write checks monthly if they want to stay in their union. It's just every way they can find to make it difficult to have unions, for unions to fund themselves, because unions, and there can be problems with unions, but even with their problems, they are one of the few structures across America that still fights for. Oh, is the mic not loud enough? Someone said couldn't hear me very well, but one of the few structures across America that still fights for workers in any way, and it's only what 7 or 10% of people in unions now.
Very, very small percentage. I can't remember, but it's actually gone up, I think, the past couple of years because of all this workplace organizing, but it's still far lower than it was, back a century ago.
Okay, so we'll do one more. Oh, that's funny. Senate Bill 1616 allows Ron DeSantis to hide his travel logs, which is also an aspect of fascism, is complete secrecy by the government and no feeling that that the average citizen deserves to know what they're doing or what they're up to.
Right. It's none of our business what our elected officials do. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, we don't really elect people in this country because we don't really have a choice. You have a choice between the red dumpster fire and the blue dumpster fire. You don't actually ever get to vote for somebody that you really believe in. You get these two shitty choices, and then you're told that you're un-American or a piece of shit if you refuse to vote for either of those two choices. You tell me that is a republic or a democracy. It's fucking not. So, I mean, they're not really in that sense elected officials, and they certainly don't act like it in terms of accountability to the people.
Yeah, and Ron DeSantis has also worked to stop people, mainly black people, from being able to vote in Florida. But as with many of these things, Democrats are also doing them just in different ways. Democrats don't generally try and stop black people from voting. They just completely rig their own primary. They try and stop others from voting. They want to stick with these completely black box voting machines where you have no idea whether the computer actually counted anything. So Democrats want to continue to have a rigged voting process in just a different way. Their form of fascism is a shade of gray different than the Republicans. But it's Ron DeSantis represents the next step. And like you said, neoliberalism leads to fascism, and that's where we're seeing it go. Okay, folks, we're going to get to a little update on what the mainstream media is not telling you about that submarine that went missing and has now been reported imploded. But please hit subscribe. Please hit thumbs up. Please leave a comment. Even if you have nothing to say, just leave a comment that says, hey,
I have nothing to say.
I have nothing to say because, the algorithm's like, hey, they're getting lots of comments. We will show them to more of the peoples because the peoples be commenting. That's what the algorithm thinks. So just leave a comment no matter what. But here's a good image that says a lot about this missing and now imploded submersible filled with millionaires and billionaires. Only 5 of them, and one of them was a kid, but 5 rich missing men, and you end up with a multi-million-dollar rescue mission, 750 missing migrants, and they get no rescue, and you have people saying we need to tighten the borders. That is the difference of the discussion being had here.
Yeah, and I think, we can talk about, yes, is the world better because there's a few less millionaires or billionaires. But the point here is not to say, aha, 5 rich people died. Like, that's not the point. I'm not here to laugh about death in that sense. The idea here is that this is the reality of our system. And I mean, we're going to get into a lot of details here, but I think it also holds true to something that I've called in the past the geography of tragedy, which is obviously the missing submersible pod Xbox controller thing happened in the North Atlantic. That's where the Titanic went down. That's very white. The Mediterranean borders Africa, not white enough. So the geography of tragedy, again, like you notice
the people
this
on the boat are not
right
white enough.
You notice this in terms of when there's like a terrorist attack in Africa. Oh, what? If there's a terrorist attack in France or in Spain, holy shit, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. Just the way that this
even
is
if the
described
numbers
and discussed in corporate media.
And even if the numbers, so let's say 12 people get killed by a terrorist attack in France or something, versus literally, and this was a real story a few years ago, 300 people were killed in a single terror blast in Egypt. And it got essentially zero mainstream media coverage in Western press. But 12 people or 5, or something die in France or Britain, and it's 24/7 for several days.
Right. And yes, of course, there's a class, there's a poor versus rich aspect, obviously. And there were two Pakistani people on the submersible submarine.
Yeah,
What the fuck are we calling it?
a submersible.
Submersible. I don't know what the fucking difference is. Okay, anyway.
There was a Pakistani, I believe, billionaire and his 19-year-old son.
And there were Pakistanis on the boat that capsized off the coast of Greece. And of course, the difference there, since they're all, these people that I'm mentioning were Pakistani, obviously that's the class structure. But we have to mention both class and race because it is a matter of class and race. If you don't pay attention to the racial aspect, then you are paying no attention to the systemic racism that exists in the global capitalist world. And yes, if this were a boat that capsized with a bunch of Ukrainians, you bet your fucking ass that there would be a lot more conversation about those poor blonde and blue-eyed people that died on that boat. You bet your ass, even if they were all poor Ukrainians as well. So we have to talk about both of those aspects when we're talking about these events. And there's also some points that I wanted to share that came from, I believe this was originally posted on World Socialist website, but Countercurrents reposted it, and they make the point that, they make a lot of good points, but let's see here. Hold, please.
Well, I'll just throw in here while you do that. Okay, excuse me, Jeopardy. You watch, we're going to get banned by YouTube for using copyrighted music. But the same can be said for missing children, usually in America. If you have a missing white girl, it often will get national coverage, depending on some factors. Again, not an exceedingly poor white girl, probably not, but they might make an exception. However, missing black child, essentially never. I don't know if anyone can even think of a time there was national coverage for a missing black child. So again, that's very race oriented. Now, there is some class structure as well. There's going to be a lot more coverage of a rich missing white girl than a poor missing white girl. But
so yes, to all that.
So, and yes,
I don't want to just be like, yeah, whatever he just said.
Wait, does that mean I won the Jeopardy question?
What do we have?
What is missing black child?
So, this article points out that, for instance, just the rescue efforts involved, quote, saving the hundreds on board the fishing vessel near Greece, once they were clearly in jeopardy, would have been so much easier than rescuing a vessel possibly resting on the bottom of the sea for any government or naval force that desired to do so.
Oh my God, for $12 you could have had it. And I'm sure Greece doesn't have much of a military, but I bet you it's enough to go fetch those people out at sea.
Also the way that they're talking about it, the implication of the reporting was that suffering refugees had brought the fate upon themselves. Whereas when you're talking about the people in the submersible, it's like, oh my God, those poor people, even though they, minus the 19-year-old, were like so gung-ho, they paid $250,000 to be there. But their fate is not resting on their shoulders. It's, oh my God, those poor people. Whereas, it's the refugees' fault for getting on a boat. So they deserve to die.
Right. When of course they were pushed through awful circumstances to end up on that boat. No one jumps on a boat to go to a country they've never been to, that they're not sure will take them, that very well might imprison them, that might separate them from their family. No one does that for fucking kicks. There was no one on that boat that was like, I'm going to go see Greece. No, they did it out of either literal violent force or economic force, which is also a form of violence. But one of those two things forced them on that boat.
Right, and as this article also points out, their mass flight has largely been precipitated by the imperialist wars and other operations carried out by Western powers, the very regimes now presiding over their deaths at sea. No, again, like nobody gets on this boat because they're like, where I live is awesome. It's great. I'd love to stay. People do these desperate things because they don't have a choice, because their home places are destroyed, environmentally, economically, whatever. Nobody makes these trips because they're just looking for a joyride. And with that, I also just wanted to share there's an organization called Alarm Phone, which is a hotline for folks. It says boat people in distress. They don't offer rescue, but they sound the alarm to the appropriate authorities. And they shared a timeline of what happened. And so I'm just going to read some of that so that people understand that this was extreme negligence. This was not, oh, the Greek authorities or European authorities had no fucking clue what was going on. They did. So this was posted on June 14th when the boat capsized. And it says that on June 13th, we, as an alarm phone, had alerted the Hellenic Coast Guard, Hellenic is Greek, at 4:53 p.m. to this boat in distress as the people had called us for help. The Greek authorities, also Italy and Malta, had already been alerted several hours earlier. Greek and other European authorities were thus well aware of this overcrowded and unseaworthy vessel. A rescue operation was not launched, and in the early hours of today, June 14th, the boat capsized. So that means that at 4:53 p.m., they received, and if you scroll down, you can see like the actual, so here's the actual timeline. So at 2:17, Alarm Phone receives the first call from the boat in distress. And then there's a timeline of another distressed call, and then they're trying to get their coordinates so that they can share that with the Greek Coast Guard. And then finally at 4:53 Central European Time, PM, they alert the Greek authorities. And they alert them via email, and they alert other actors, including Frontex and UNHCR Greece, which is UN, human rights arm of the UN, and nothing. So they knew. So like the early hours of June 14th, let's say it was, 2 a.m. From 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. the following day, nobody did fuck all, even though they were well aware 3 different official Italy, Greece, and Malta had been alerted to this boat in distress, and nobody did a goddamn fucking thing about it. And there are reports that in the hold of this boat, there were at least 100 children that are, at this point, almost definitely dead. There are roughly 78, 79 survivors, and none of them are children. So this is homicide. To get these distress calls and do fuck all about it is fucking homicide. And yes, it has to do with race. And yes, it has to do with class. It has to do with imperialism, the imperialism that is baked into Europe's history and present as it relates to Africa and the Middle East. This is absolute murder. And yet this information, what I just shared, which is not fucking difficult to find, is not being shared on any corporate media stations, showing how authorities, how Coast Guard authorities, whose job it is to save people at distress on the fucking ocean, did nothing about it. Nobody's fucking talking about this. The only thing that you can find on, if you Google shit, is like, how long does it take to die if your submersible implodes? Like, I don't fucking care. I mean, yes, bummer, but what the fuck? These people were murdered. 100 children were fucking murdered by imperialist powers who want to tighten their borders, and you're crying about fucking 4 billionaires? This is absolutely disgusting.
And the only way you get people to a point, meaning the citizens of Greece and Britain and France and all the Americans who don't care about this story, the only way you get people to a point where they will look past their own humanity and the humanity of the people on that boat and decide they don't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if those people die and drown and are killed. The only way you get them to that point is through a lot of social engineering, a lot of mainstream media propaganda acting like those peoples don't care. And acting like, well, it was their own choice to get on that boat. And acting like, oh, well, we have a difficult time with our borders, so I guess just let those kids die out there. Like, it takes a lot of social engineering to make most people in a country ignore humanity like that, ignore that these are human beings. And there's not enough discussion, debate, talk at all about how egregious and fucking repulsive that social engineering is.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you can just share that article one more time.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to share. There's a screenshot. If you can, sorry, scroll down. There's a screenshot. It was also sent to NATO.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't NATO supposed to help?
750 people in distress near Kalamata. And this is copied to the UN, copied to NATO, copied to various offices at the UN.
And it points out 750 persons on board, including many women and children. It gives their position very clearly. Additional information, several people, among them some babies, are very sick.
Well, in their defense, NATO has a bot checking its email, and that bot.
I thought you did too.
I have a bot checking my email. I wish. And that bot did not find it very important because he's afraid actually that they'll take his job.
They?
The people on the boat.
Oh.
Will take the bot's job. Okay.
Sorry. I needed a minute to
No, I know. Oh. I know.
I literally want to beat, if I want to beat these people, severely with a tire iron. All of the people,
the ruling elite,
all of the people that are CC'd on this goddamn email, that read it and were like, I don't care. I want to beat them with a fucking tire iron.
Yeah. And also a lot of this has to do with the rhetoric, anti-immigrant rhetoric that has to be done, but that is picked as a good scapegoat for the reality in which we live. We have a lot of people in America and obviously a lot of people in Greece and Britain and all of these places living tough or difficult lives. And they need to be, the politicians and the ruling elite want to make sure the blame doesn't come back at them. And so the way to do that is you point at others and you say, it's the fucking immigrants, right? They've been doing that one forever. It's the Chinese, it's the Russians, it's the gay people that are making your life tough. And so that is another reason for all of the anti-immigrant or anti-China or anti-Russia rhetoric that we hear.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. I want to move on to Zelensky. Put out an odd statement.
Speaking of Russia,
that seems to be hinting at Ukraine possibly getting ready for a false flag of some sort or something horrific. But anyway, I'll leave that decision of what it details to you. I'm about to read that we will go to rumble.com/LeeCamp for that story where this live stream will continue. There in LeeCamp.net, my locals page are the two places this live stream will continue. But before we do that, I just want to say, if you get anything out of this show and my live streams in general, this is also a podcast, by the way, look up Common Censored. If you get anything out of all of that, then I hope you will join up at LeeCamp.net. The minimum is $6 a month, and that's 38 cents an episode. So I hope you find this useful and find this worth grabbing. A membership at LeeCamp.net. You also get a free copy of my new ebook, Dangerous Ideas. So there's a lot of good reasons to join up over there.
Yeah. And you get to support the radical content that we've been talking about, that you don't get on corporate media. And also, we also run the site radindmedia.com. So it's when you support this work, you're not just supporting the stuff that you see here and the stuff that you hear. Here.
Here. Hey.
You're supporting all of the projects that Lee and I do together and separately. So please consider supporting.
All right, so I just put the link for the supporting is at leecamp.net. So go over there. Even if you're going to keep watching and you're like, well, maybe later, just go ahead and open a little tab, open a little link to leecamp.net. You can look at it later. But I also just put the link in the comment thread for where this stream will continue for free at Rumble, rumble.com/leecamp. And I hope you will join up. Come watch over there. It will also continue on my locals page, leecamp.net.
Oh, and if you join up, then you get to watch this shit whenever you want because it won't disappear.
Right. So the live streams stay up for about 24 hours and then they go bye-bye. However, if you want to watch them anytime at your discretion, at your leisure,